So this is Tech Off Topic, a general tech podcast with a little bit of tangentialness added to it, usually because my brain is chaotic evil. This evening or day, if you're listening at a later time, is a little different to usual. This is more of an interview style where I have the joy of a guest from an organization that operates in my professional circumstances rather than just somebody I know from the wider internet or conferences. So it is a piece of technology involved in developer engagement. So I'm going to bring in Jake, the CEO of Data Protocol, and allow him to introduce himself. Hello.
Hey, Mike. How are you?
I am all good. So feel free
to be here. Thanks for having me.
The internet.
Hello, Internet. I'm Jake Ward. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Data Protocol. Data Protocol is it's a platform for software developers. Our goal is to make their lives a little easier by giving them the resources and support they need in a way that they want. We think that we've built a better mousetrap when it comes to developer engagement and advocacy and delivering dev docs and information and on-demand answers. We're certain we've built a better mousetrap for platforms and product companies to deliver that information. And so far, so good. We're having a lot of fun and generally finding the developer audience to be supportive of our particular approach that I'm sure we're going to touch on.
I am going to ask something very, very stupid because I am a smart person that is also single-handedly ignorant as heck. What do you mean by mousetrap?
What do I do? So there's it's an old patent adage that if you build a better mousetrap, the world will beat a path to your door. The idea that you can reinvent things 100 times, but if you build a better one, you'll have a lot of success. For software developers for the past 20, 25 years, companies of all sizes that whether it's SaaS or platform or any API or SDK company for that matter, that has used that has tried to sell or engage or generally support developers as an audience, stakeholders, users, customers. There's been a pretty standard way of going about that, right? There's developer documentation, there's a sales funnel, there's Discord and Common Room. There's new ways to engage and support. And what I pretty strenuously believe is that when you're trying to help somebody solve a problem, they need to hear a voice. They need to see somebody that gives a shit. They don't need to read a memo. And so we have built a platform that leads with video, that delivers information in a more effective way, that is driven by instructional design. And so if I'm a developer that encounters a problem, whether it be technical or process-based, or just whether or not I should use a product, I don't want to Command F my way through a dev doc or go looking for an answer. I want it given to me so I can get back to work.
Okay. Well, we'll get more onto Data Protocol Data Protocol at large in a moment. But first, I want to ask you about you.
Sure.
Only because I obviously did the internet sleuthing, etc., as necessary. And I didn't realize, because I'm very happy that I've seen you on stage inside the last 6 months, well, 7 months now.
DevRel Con,
because you gave my team the 2 awards. Well, you presented the awards for Best International Program and Best Overall Program, which thank you very much for those. They live proudly on our trophy wall in our headquarters in Croatia.
Well, if you've got an entire wall, it isn't the first and won't be the last time you win those awards.
Oh, I'm saying nothing because that's jinxing it. But right. So when doing the internet sleuthing, I've realized that you have been in the space for a long time, like not specifically developer relations, but like advocating for developers and technology for a long time. I couldn't see if you were an engineer or anything before that, so I was trying to work out, how does one advocate whilst not being the engineer as a day job?
My career to this point has been a pretty interesting mix. I worked in politics. I was a press secretary and communications director in Congress, in the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. And when I left politics, I sort of worked in public affairs, and I worked with a bunch of larger technology, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, some of the larger technology platforms on issues that they cared about. And that brought me sort of in contact with this was 2006, 7, 8, brought me in contact with some of those folks. And then, since this is a long form podcast, I'll tell you the full story. In 2009, I was working at a public affairs agency that had a branding arm that was working with Google and Intel on Google TV. This was 15 years ago. Google TV, if any of your audience is old enough to remember, was a keyboard, like an actual keyboard, and a piece that plugged into your old-fashioned LED TV, right? Back before everything was smart. This made it smart. Or you could buy a box, basically a TiVo-looking box that would do the same thing. But the question that was being raised to us was, how do we get people to use this thing? How do we get people to think I'm putting this smart device in my house? Again, 15 years ago, but important. The thing that we came up with is you need a killer app. You need to create enough interest in a particular solution that people need to have this device in their house. The iPhone was out, but it was barely out. BlackBerry was still a thing. The store wasn't a thing at all. Facebook had just done the like button. This was a long time ago. And the gist of it was we came up with a bunch of different PR, public affairs type things, but I worked with this team to brand the idea of killer app and how would you engage developers as a community writ large to say, here's this SDK for this entirely new technology. What would you build on it? How do we incentivize it? What does it look like? And that brought me in contact with some of the folks at Twilio, some of the Techstars guys, some of the nascent pieces of developer relations. So a year and a half later, when my co-founder and I launched the Application Developers Alliance, which was on paper a trade association, a 501c3, like any other sort of trade group. But in practice, it was the first time anybody had ever said, software developers are a workforce that matter. They're a growing subset of engineering. They're people that are building things that will drive economic growth, that will raise public affairs, public policy questions, and mostly will be on the radar of consumers forever. And over the course of a couple of years, we built this community of about 150,000 developers worldwide. We 260 or so companies that range from Meta and Google and American Express to TestFlight. Remember TestFlight? The people that Apple bought that back-ended. So I went to their Santa Monica office when there was 4 people, and they had the coolest T-shirts I'd ever seen. Anyway, that's all by way of saying that space then led into 7 years later, me leaving the Alliance and thinking something is happening here. There's a flooded marketplace. Developers, 30 million of them worldwide. Many of them are working in a B2C space. Everybody else is in this B2B thing. There's new pieces on the horizon from AI. Privacy continues to be an issue. Cambridge Analytica had just happened. And so I took a couple of years and I basically went around the world and talked to developers. I did design thinking workshops with several thousand and said, what do you need? What would make your life better? What would make your products better? What would, frankly, reduce risk, right? For you, but also for your partners. How do you keep Cambridge Analytica from happening again? How do you ensure that as a company, you're raising money, you're going to go out, you're going to sell to this audience of developers, they're your users, you need them as partners. How do you give them the support you need without tripping and falling and ending up with a $5 billion fine or being put out of business or having some level of an uprising among a developer community? Because this is a fickle, mercurial group. Like, the only thing developers want to do more than build cool shit is tell you you're wrong. And so that was going to be a persistent issue that everybody dealt with, every company that dipped a toe into the space. And so after 10 years of being in that world, I thought I'd give it a try. And data protocol is the byproduct of all of that. So no, I'm not an engineer. I'm not a marketer. I never actually worked in DevRel. I had a very senior engineer at Facebook 1,000 years ago who was one of the mythical 10x coders that are written about often, say to me that, you might be the right messenger for this thing because you look like one of us, but you talk like one of them. And I think the inverse was also true. From how do you raise money? How do you build a thing? How do you run a team? How do you deal with issues like this? So I've gotten really lucky that I've messed up my career in enough ways to be where I am today.
I'm not going to lie, being put into such a very, very, very specifically shaped box as somebody who was an engineer who progressed into DevRel, it's like, oh yeah, I do enjoy telling people they're
That
wrong.
hurt a little. Yeah.
Yeah. I must admit, over the years, I have now been put in my place enough that I don't do it as publicly, but I still think it in the back of my head. It's like, oh, no, just in case I am
It's important.
wrong as well.
It's important. Honesty is the bedrock of any healthy relationship. But engineers generally, right? You've never met an electrician that doesn't walk into a house and say, I wouldn't have done it like that. Engineers are the same way. I don't care what they're building.
Unfortunately, in engineering, there is the old adage of, oh, it was always the last guy to leave's fault, which I may or may not have used in past life as well. Sure. But I'm thoroughly impressed, because you're still involved with the Connected Commerce Council as well. Which
I sit on the board. Yeah, that was one of my projects when I was trying to figure out what I was going to do next. I started the Connected Commerce Council. I'm still proudly a small business owner and chairman of the board of directors for them, and very interested in the issues that we deal with on a persistent basis.
It's just you're essentially doing both ends of the spectrum. You're both the consumer and adopter of technologies built by developers for other SMEs and SMBs, but at the same time you're on the other end of the spectrum trying to enable and grow developers into doing things. Are you literally burning the candle at both ends with developers stuck in the middle?
Oh yeah. I'm 23 years old. Like I look like this because of how hard we're working. No, I'm kidding. I believe that software developers, the people that are building software, designing and building software, are the manufacturing class of the digital age. I think that we owe it to them and to ourselves to not just give them faster horses, but to give them automobiles. And whether that is jumpstarting things with AI or as basic as extending and deepening and enriching dev docs so that people get answers faster and are less likely to break things. I just want to do as much as we can to support that work. And I feel pretty good about the mission, about how far we've come.
Okay. I must admit, I'm going to have to put my hands up and own up. We are not consumers of data protocol at InfoBip. So
not yet.
The man has strong feelings there. So I can't talk personally towards how it operates for end users. But I have obviously done more sleuthing. I'm curious because a very, very odd and open question to ask. What is developer relations to you? Because I have had the joy of doing several roles for several different sizes of organization, and it's always slightly different. So engaging is always different as well.
Yeah, I think that's right. First things first, I think it matters what the company needs, right? One of our advisors is Don Dodge, who was one of the original developer relations, developer advocates. He was at Microsoft under Dan O'Lewin, who basically invented it, right? He's a friend. He was a board member at the Alliance. He's a great guy, but he goes all the way back. But as a developer advocate for Google in 2016, what are you advocating for? Like, what are you talking about? He was advocating for the developers inside Google, not the other way around. Keith Casey, who I originally met at Twilio, developer relations, tracksuit, chucks, hackathons, teaching people how to work it. James Pardon, same thing. Like, these guys were grinding out the engagement piece. That's where I learned sort of how to do this well. You start by empathizing. What are you building? That's really cool. How can I help? We might be the right solution. If we're not, I can hook you up with somebody who is. Right? That is developer relations. That's solving a problem for the developer. Doing it at scale is a lot harder than doing it in, a hackathon, certainly. For my money, if I'm running a team, if I run a company where a product is the lifeblood and developers are the customer, consumer, stakeholder, user, developer relations has to be two things. It has to be somebody who has their finger on the pulse of what our product is doing or not doing and why and how to fix it, so that they can speak as an advocate for those developers internally to my product team, my engineering team, my marketing team, my sales team. But that person also has to have the ability to operationalize what they hear back to the community. And I don't, Slack's great, Discord's great, Conference great. It's really important to have those conversations. The reason Stack Overflow was as successful as it was, as long as it was, is that Joel Spolsky's founder, whose roots were in Microsoft from the early days, under quickly and by an expert. So the first thing they would do is turn to the person next to them and say, do you know the answer to this question? But as that became harder and harder to do, they had an open forum at Microsoft where they could have that conversation through ostensibly AIM, early days. Stack did the same thing. You were just using a much larger network of experts. The drop in Stack traffic over the last year from 20 million to 10 million is a direct response to the ChatGPT integration among software developers, where you can ask a question that you would otherwise ask a community, and without being told you're an idiot, still get the answer. So I think developer relations is a safe place for developers to ask questions and to navigate the best practices for building their products. And it's a way for a company to understand how those products are being used, how they're being implemented, and what they can do to improve both.
Okay. Makes sense. And I do actually agree with you.
If you as a developer relations professional can't tell me how much every person who engages each point of your life cycle of your developer journey is worth to your company, one of those things is broken.
How so?
So if you don't have a true LTV for your developers, you can't actually plan, price, innovate on your products. You can approximate it, right? How do you know what to invest into your product set if you don't know what it's worth on the other side? The only way that you can find out what that is worth and think about the utility is by going to ask the developers. What would you do with this if I did this? How would you build if you did that kind of stuff?
But that's assuming all the products that use DevRel follow PLG.
The product-led growth, certainly. I'm talking about the end goal, the LTV. How much are they worth to you per year, per month, per 10-year? What does that value look like? The lifetime value of a user. You don't have to have shown them the product to get them to buy it. You could do it in mass or enterprise, whatever. It doesn't even have to be one-on-one. It can be enterprise, but you have to know the value to your company in order to appropriately align assets. And for a long time, and I suspect that you'll agree with this, Mike, for a long time, we've been guessing. We don't have LTV numbers because we don't know what the churn rate actually is pre-registration. We have no attributable metrics on the value piece, and then we can't tell where there's breakage versus opting out in the end user for the vast majority of product sets.
Yeah, and it's like the wonderful thing of developer metrics, which is part of what LTV is based upon. It's a bit of ridiculously well-educated guesswork.
Yeah, which is one of the, so for anybody who hasn't yet clicked the button, Data Protocol is an online platform where developers come, it's quick login, SSO, it's video first, delivered in a Linux terminal with a lot of sort of the educational instructional design components to deliver 4-minute, 5-minute to 20-minute videos backed up by resources and curated links. All of that is a way of saying this is a better way to give information to developers. Don't take my word for it. Go kick the tires. Dataprotocol.com. It's free for developers forever. The content is built in partnership with Infobip, Meta, Google, Intel, VMware, now Broadcom. Like we work with those companies to solve their specific problem. The courses are then hosted on our platform. They get a channel. The channel has metrics. But because there is full attribution in aggregate and individualized, you then can actually get an answer to the question. Why did people leave? What did they come for? What was valuable to them? And then you align that with what their value is to you, and you've got an answer to the question.
Okay, that does bring me to the question I was curious about, because so I looked at Data Protocol when we got the award last year, because I was like, why is this company I've never heard of involved in DevRel? Okay, developer enablement and engagement, cool. But when you look at the site, you because unfortunately it's that wonderful thing of without kicking the tires as from both ends of the like being a brand as well as a developer to use it. It looks like it is Udemy or Coursera on steroids. So it looks like an education platform, but it's more than that, because like you look at the products, and the first two things you're really hit with that like make absolute sense are courses and certifications, which yes, I am one of those old engineers. It's like certifications are worth nothing until you need to prove that you actually know what you're talking about. Then they're worth a lot. The AWS ones, like I spent years avoiding doing those until it was like, you've architected systems in AWS. How do we know this? It's closed source code. Nuts. And went and got my solutions architect. So it's like, I do believe they're worth it. But how do you engage developers to actually like encourage them to do things? How do you engage? Because it's a closed platform. You have to sign up to know what's going on internally. How do you show that for a developer coming in, it is an amazing resource to just engage with?
Short answer is not as well as we need to. We are it's a pretty young company, right? We've been in market about 27 months. We were, because of what I used to do for a living, incredibly lucky, fortunate to have the partners we had out of the gates, right? We run basically developer compliance end to end for MetaQuest now. That's not an insignificant thing, and these are incredibly important developers, not just for MetaQuest, but for the future of AI, AR, right? Like this is a thing that matters, and that we feel like we're on the edge with them is a very cool feeling. That's all by way of saying I didn't raise money in the Valley on purpose. I did not go to San Francisco and Silicon. We're in Charleston, South Carolina, that we are as far away from that as literally possible. I didn't want that downward pressure of you got to go sell, you got to go grow, you got to go do this thing. I wanted to build it right first and for this specific audience. We spent more than a year, beta testing features and functions on the platform, from the pre-filled notes to when do you put fly-ins and chyrons, and how do we do docs, and what's a better developer experience. I've shown it to 20,000 developers now. I have not had a single developer look at the platform and say, I don't get it. Every single one of them says, this is cool. This is Coursera on steroids. This is for me. And that, frankly, if nothing else works and we fail overall, I will be incredibly proud of the empathy that went into this developer experience. And I'll encourage companies forever to do a better job just thinking about what they need. This is a better way to engage developers. Don't take my word for it. Take a look. Developers, go to it, kick the tires on a course, tell me, jake@dataprotocol.com. I want to hear your thoughts. And if it's a good idea, I'm stealing it. I'm not giving you attribution, just so we're clear. For Intel came to us 2 years ago and said, we're going to do this thing around cloud university. It's really important. Blah, 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 blah. We're the future of cloud. Can you help us? We said, sure. Like we've talked to all the LMSs. We've looked at Docebo. We've talked to Coursera. I didn't want to build a backend system. I wanted to build on top of one, but we couldn't get anybody to do what we needed them to do with all the functionality piece. And Intel took a look at the Linux terminal, the CLI, and said, can that thing turn on? What can you do with that? And we figured out pretty quickly that we could bounce it off a virtual machine and run computational commands all day long. So now we can do a real-time video with a sandbox environment that enables hands-on training or just a PLG. Like I get to play with the product before I use it, like literally play with it. And I can do it in this environment. And you as a platform get to measure what people are doing and why and where their break lines are and what questions they have. All of that is a better way to demonstrate a product, is a better way to drive proficiency, and it put the metrics in the right hands.
Okay. There's actually a really interesting question here that I was going to raise that's being raised. From a learning and development perspective, I believe that's what L&D stands for. How big is your team of learning professionals, and how do you keep the material accurate and effective? Which actually makes sense, because this is material that lives on your platform, not your partners. So the responsibility is split somewhere between the two of you, right?
Yes, I think that's right. I'm going to answer that question, but let's put a pin in the other one, because I have not successfully answered the experience piece of it yet. My L&D team is better than they are big. They're incredibly talented. Instructional designers, for the most part. There's 5 of them all in total. They are maniacs. They have been accused of witchcraft. They have my undying adoration, and certainly our partners appreciate that. They state a problem, and over the course of a couple of meetings, 30-minute, we call them discovery calls, we're able to unpack the nature of the problem, where the solution might lie, how would you measure success. Okay, that's interesting. They put together an outline. The outline is signed off on by whoever the partner is. They write the script. The script then goes to the partner. They sign off on it. Then the content team shoots the video, usually on location. Do a lot in San Francisco, New York, LA. We have a studio here. We're happy to do it. Then it goes to post-production, animation, graphics, etc. The learning team does all of the support, pre-filled notes, documentation, curation, with the idea of delivering maximal efficiency and enabling sort of the takeaway, right? You learn it once, you don't need to go back and look at it again. But if you wanted to, the platform is fully searchable and has timestamps, so that when you go in, you click on it, it brings you right back to the context of the video where you can learn it again, which is also the answer to how we stay on top of things that change. The platform is a communication network. If you, InfoBip, are using us, you've got a product you want to talk about, we do a short code that talks about all the features and functions. 2 short codes. Okay, so we put them in your onboarding flow, but you change the name of a product, or you update your API docs, or you generally shift any part of your approach. If it's something we can just do a different fly-in, we'll do that. Something we just do a different graphic, we do that. If we have to go reshoot it because you've changed the name of the whole company, we'll do that. It's part of the contract, it's part of the deal. Most importantly, anybody who's going to take the course gets notified that there's been a change. In platform, a little buzzer goes off and says, this thing has changed, takes you right to where it's been changed. And so you're not trying to backfill. Like, you change your dev docs, somebody's not going to know they've changed until something breaks in their product. They have to come back, find the thing that's changed, go fix it. That affects your sentiment, causes breakage, and a lot of churn.
Holy crap! Pardon my French. Not only is it a platform, God damn it! I've been trying to very carefully make sure I don't sound like a shill for data protocol, because I can't.
I'll do it.
Not a user. And it's like, oh my Lord, it's a platform and it's a set of professional services that keep the whole learning experience for the end user consistent and good.
And notifying the end user. That's the biggest piece of it, is that communication piece there. I say to people all the time, if you had your entire developer network in front of you and you had 5 minutes and you knew they were listening, what would you tell them? Then what would you ask them? Because we can do both, right? We know that they're listening. We know they're engaged because we're asking questions throughout the course. But those questions are also an opportunity for you to ask them, what do you need? What do you think? What do you want? Why are you here? How do we help you better? All of that information is then available to you as a partner, and aggregate or individualized, depending on what you want to do. We like certifications fine. We prefer badges, because a badge says, I took these 3 courses. It was a total of 14 minutes, but I now know how to do this thing, and this thing on your product. This badge should enable me to go faster through your review process, or to get higher standing in your queue based on support, because every partner can be treated like a managed partner if you're using a product like Data Protocol, which allows you to scale this engagement.
Okay, that makes sense. You had to put a pin in the comment earlier. Would you like to carry on about the experience?
Just real quick. So we didn't do marketing for 2 years. And what we did do, we did poorly. When you saw me on stage in London, that was the first event we'd ever done.
Really?
Yeah, because we wanted to get the product right. I didn't want to be one of those companies that went out and told people that we had the greatest thing since vanilla ice cream, and then 3 weeks later say, actually, we're changing to coffee. Right? We had not solved the problem yet that we were looking to solve, and it took a minute. This conversation is part of our kickoff for actual marketing, where we are out in the world telling people we think we figured it out. We'd love to talk to you. So when you say InfoBip isn't using us yet, you're right. We also haven't asked. When I'm talking to a number of what I call developer first companies right now, but my goal within 2 years is that any company that cares about developers and has invested in their success at least knows who we are, whether they're choosing to use their legacy programs and saying, look, we don't think that's I got an email today from somebody I'd been talking to. We don't think that's a highly leveraged position and we're not looking to invest. I really hope their developers never find that out, right? I hope that companies never find out that our developers never find out that the companies they depend on don't think that engaging with them at the highest level possible is worth it.
That does say a lot about the organizations that treat their biggest community and advocates for future prosperity.
Sure does.
Oh, yeah. Well, sad for them. Trying to work out how to interpret that question, but yes, okay. So we do have a question. So there we go. So what type of content would keep on the partner's website, and what would you put on data protocols? That's a reasonable question.
It's a great question. No, it's a great question. So I think there's two considerations. One is how much of your documentation, your engagement, your video, your support, your communication, like are you engaging your community on so much of a regular basis that you've like integrated Slack into this thing and you're sort of bouncing people back and forth? In that instance, we would simply extend that engagement, those resources, by integrating what we call short codes, so these short videos, as links, right? So there'd be GIFs and some of the dev docs that you could drop them into Slack. Everything else is exactly the same, right? That's just an extension of the work that you're already doing. The difference, or maybe the most important piece, is that it enables that attributable metric, right? It allows the funnel to get a little wider. It also creates discoverability. On our platform, every partner gets a channel. Every channel hosts all of the content. So InfoBip would have 2 short codes and a course that lives on the InfoBip channel. You send your developers to that channel, not to the broader homepage, but to your channel, which is branded and as an extension of your program. If you have an SSO or a SAML, or you have some level of like, these are our developers and we want them to have an account, we can use that as the login so that you can directly attribute their activity rather than going through Google, for example. So in that instance, we are strictly a complement to what you're already doing to deepen and enrich in that engagement. In some cases, we are taking the whole thing, right? The full experience from soup to nuts of like the initial piece, the thing that you see first is on data protocol, and it is a video about how the product works. And then it takes you through a series of, this is what you can do with it. This is what you need to know. This is where we keep all of the information. And that will send you back and forth to existing dev docs, or sort of, we think they're better, but time will tell, a more interactive level of developer documentation. So instead of sort of a static page, it asks a question, you answer it, it gives you the next step, so on and so on and so on. So there's a logic flow to it, and it isn't just a wall of text. That's also attributable, so that you get line by line analysis that informs you where things are breaking, why people are there, etc. All that is by way of saying, I have partners that say, we have spent tens of millions of dollars to build all these dev docs, to build all of this video, to build this content. We're not investing another $10,000 to do a short code with you. To which I say, that is pretty foolish and short-sighted, because what you've got is what you've done. This is the next piece of that. Give us one chance. our success rate on that is 100%. Right? Companies that have said no, and I said, give me one chance, do one short code, show me the extension of what this looks like. The value add, 93% of every developer that's ever taken a course on platform says this is a better way to engage content. But we are not looking to take over existing material. That should stay exactly where it is.
Okay, that actually makes absolute sense. Now, is this a question that's cruel for you or good for your good for everybody else? So, it's for the end user. It's a learning platform. For we in the developer relations sphere, it's a way of being able to teach and track. But
Sure.
one of the biggest things that I have noticed, because I'm very lucky, I've spent time with some amazing developer educators. Just Joanne Sewell, who I work with at the moment, and I've had the pleasure of learning from people like Martin Davies and stuff over the years.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I've had pointed out to me is because I'm terrible at this because I just am. Everybody learns different. Now, you've said data protocol leans heavily into video and quiz-based material. What about those of the, and I'm going to age myself slightly here, the crusty people who just want to be able to control and search for bits?
So that's what I mean about we don't want you to rip out the other pieces that are already there, right? It's certainly not new that somebody's been like, this is Coursera, this is Udacity on steroids. This is an LMS for developers is something I hear a lot, or this is YouTube with questions. It is all of those things, but it's also the next piece, which is that it's about the learner. Udacity and Coursera are about the platform first, they're about the topic second, and they're about their learner third. That's how they scale. That's why they're massive online programs, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're entirely about the learner, which means that if you get into a course, a short code, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, it's going to be about the product, it's going to be super tight. We're not trying to educate you, we're trying to give you information. That's different, right? It's fundamentally different. You want an answer to a question. That's not education. If you're taking courses towards badges and certifications, that's education. That's certainly leaning on the instructional design, certainly leaning on the platform to deliver this information. That would include quizzes and assessments so that we could validate proficiency. The short codes don't. Both of which are incredibly rich in dropdowns, in what we call fly-ins, right? The links that come through the top that lead back to the dev doc, that lead to resources and guides that we build that are visually appealing, certainly more intuitive. If you want to leave, you should leave, right? If the video piece of listening to somebody, if watching it on the screen isn't how you want to learn or engage, just click on one of the links and you're gone. But we think we've done a better job curating those links and putting them in context and then beating the inefficiency out of an index so that anybody can find the answer they're looking for, regardless of how they got there or what questions came next. We've got all the pre-filled notes, they're there. You've got all of the resources, they're there. You can speed this thing up to 1.5 so you can bang through a 5-minute course like that. But the end result is you feel smarter and like you can solve your problem.
Okay. I'm not going to lie, I love the idea of just speed up to 1.5 because I now do that to everything on YouTube when I'm trying to absorb it because I am not a video learner at all.
But what you can't do, and this was a deal breaker for me, is you can't skip. Well, actually, it's not true. You can't hit play and walk away, right? We're going to ask you a question every once in a while to make sure that you're paying attention, but they're not like, have you solved a Rubik's Cube question? Is this what you're looking for? Questions. And we check in to make sure that this is helping you get where you need to go, while also giving you all of the links to bounce you back to where you were aiming in the first place.
You have Netflix, Are You Still Watching? But for Are You Still Listening?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
I don't know if I love that or hate that. I can't quite tell because I hate it on Netflix, but I kind of like it on this idea.
I promise you, this is intended to not be corporate training, right? Where everybody comes in and once a year they got to do a series of things. They hit play, they go play video games, whatever. Once in a while they answer a question. This doesn't suck. This is
You say that to a person with a
painless.
backlog of those corporate trainings that I still need to do.
They're terrible. People ask all the time, will you do this for this? Absolutely not. I'm not interested in teaching sexual harassment training or lobbying compliance or like the conflict of interest stuff to large companies. I'm not interested in doing that unless you tell me that it's strictly for your developer audience. Then sure, we can talk. Because developers will feel more comfortable in this space. They'll feel more engaged and seen. All of those things matter. Every bit of information matters. It doesn't have to be painful, right? What you're looking for isn't completion, it's understanding. And it doesn't have to suck.
I like how the principle here is everything can be better. It doesn't have to suck.
It's true.
Okay, right. I'm going to move on from the learner and developer focused part of it because I'm now going to start asking questions from my perspective as a developer advocate and somebody who does the analytics and stuff internally at work. Because, well, I may as well be completely selfish and ask my questions. So, what is the biggest challenge for developer relations professionals around this side of the experience space? So DevEx, such a huge thing. It covers everything from developer docs to SDKs to blogging to like even the conference talks that are given to try and encourage people to adopt and learn from. What is the biggest, what have you seen from all the research you have been doing over the last 3 years? The biggest problem in the space?
I mean, I think the answer is in the question, Mike. I think that anything that is that ill-defined is destined to fit poorly. And that it's not that developer relations or developer advocacy is a nascent thing. This isn't super new. Apple was doing this stuff in the 80s. But it is certainly the case that with every new product, with every new service, there's a new expectation. And we're just coming out of a period where you could invent a SaaS company and give it a weird name and spell it in a strange way and raise 25 million on an A round, right? Like you wouldn't need to have sold a single thing, and you could raise a bunch of money. And then the expectation was that you'd go sell it to developers or developers would use it. Twilio made it look easy like 10 years after it was really hard. And Jeff's whole thing was about developer loyalty and developer empowerment and ask your developers about us and the whole like billboard on the 101. It's a great story. There's no question about it, but the product was simple, clean, and awesome. And it wasn't until mobile apps became what they were going to become that people started to use Twilio like that it took off. And that's all by way of saying that if you're fighting for your life, your developer relations team becomes, your tip of the spear. But if there isn't that sense of urgency and you're trying to build out 2-year runways and this is what we're doing and we're going to these conferences and we need 23% year-on-year usage growth and we need to reduce churn and you're like introducing all of these things, then you're asking developer relations people to be marketers. You're asking them to be community managers. You're asking them to sort of advocate for an audience that isn't clear sometimes about what they want. What they want is to use something quickly and get the hell out of there. And then you're asking them to be responsible for budget that isn't, as we've talked about, isn't clearly aligned with a deliverable. You could spend $100 million trying to get developers to use a shitty product and never get anybody to use it because the product's not any good. You could spend no money and get 100 million uniques over the lifetime of a company for no dollars because the product's incredible. Most of us are working somewhere in between there where we think the product is pretty great and we have to build awareness, but then we have to measure it. We have to promote it. We have to continue to innovate. We have to push that's a lot of things that one person or one team needs to do. And I think that it's so nebulous sometimes. And then every once in a while you get like, this is a year of efficiency. What are your metrics? What are your values? Did you create ROI for the company. That's like, okay, but last year you just want to know how many times I spoke on stage in front of an audience of more than 20 people. And that was my KPI. Now it's, did I drop money to the bottom line? Those are two very different things.
Yeah, having experienced that sort of flip flopping over the years, I can, yeah. But you do point out that like Twilio were there and they did it great. Like, don't get me wrong, Rob Spector, Devin, the rest, yes, and Tim Falls and Mon Davis at SendGrid back in the day, yes, amazing at it. But there was also this weird development of what I've heard being coined the cult of personality.
Sure.
Which, as far as I can tell, doesn't help the end engineer come on board and work. It becomes a marketing machine.
I had this conversation this morning actually about the 80-20 component of developer relations professionals, particularly now when it is hunting season for so many of these points of efficiency. And it's that if you have built a personal brand, if you have a podcast and a Twitch, if people know who you are as a person, not just an extension of your company, you become more valuable to the company and to the people. It's good. It's great. It's 20%. It's important. I get it. The other 80% are trying to specifically and only operate inside their company to make their product better or to better service their community. Their jobs are certainly more at risk than the personal brand holders. Mm-hmm. They are no less valuable, right? They're no less important to the ecosystem, and certainly no less important to solving individual engineers' problems when they are inbound or even at scale when they're being pushed. I think that it's important as a company. It all depends on where this sits, right? But let's say it sits in marketing, that a developer relations team sits in marketing. I'll tell you right now, it's in the wrong place, but it sits in marketing. How are they being measured and what is it you're looking for? Do they all have to have a personal brand, or can the company have a brand and they live under it? Is there a tone? Is there an attitude? Is there a channel that you want to pound on that you know your audience wants to engage? That's where your ICP is, et cetera. Or are you sort of nuts and bolts? We got to fix this thing, and then this thing, community management. We've got 20,000 dedicated users on Asana. We're never going to have more than that. We don't need more than that. We're managing this community. This is what we do. I don't think you need anybody with a personal brand inside of if you're not trying to sort of defend against a competitor or promote a new product or roll out this new thing. What you need is people that are going to help operators figure out how to fix things.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I actually have a question from Jeremy Mize that I managed to gather earlier, which I'm still really curious what his new thing's going to be about, by the way. It's going to, whatever it is, it's going to be interesting. And the question he has is ask for your take on the massive changes DevRel has had and seen and experienced over the last 3 years and what they see the next jump is. Because like we've gone through personality, which is still kind of a thing. And with the more, well, in my opinion, the more defined job roles that exist, you now have your experienced engineer, your educator, your community managers, where they can focus on being great at what they're great at rather than developer evangelist, does all the things. What is the change that you've seen? Because you've grown Data Protocol during the end of the big freeze of DevRel spending because pandemic into the oh shit, spend money because we're now behind part of the post-pandemic and everything in between. And you've done a lot of research into the professionals. What's the biggest change?
I think so I think that Jeremy put out a thing about 6-7 months ago about the maturity of the space and how we all needed to understand that metrics were going to matter. Like we were coming to the dance late, but let's celebrate that we're here at all kind of deal, that metrics matter and we all need to grow up. and be able to defend ourselves and talk about our value inside of our companies, so that when our boss's boss said, well, what has DevRel done for us? We can be like, actually, we grew this by 8%, and without it, your numbers would be this. It's what I said earlier. If you can't answer the question about what every single person in your community is worth from a bottom line standpoint, you are susceptible to that. I think that's the thing. There is a pretty dramatic shift that's happening within the space of what developers are building with rather than what they're building on. Like AI is very cool. Everybody thinks it's very cool. Most people are not building on it, they're building with it. And the idea of improving or creating efficiencies around coding and around architecture and like how fast can I go and what does that look like is important. But we saw firsthand, like the store just wiped out 600 wrapper startups within an hour and a half of Sam's presentation. That's the volatility we're talking about here. Every one of those companies was going to hire a developer relations person. That's the sort of the cracks in the ecosystem as it's convulsing. Like, it's taking one more giant thing where a bunch of former engineers are going to try to be community leads, are going to try to operationalize solution-based communications within smaller groups, because the market is as close to saturation as we've ever seen in terms of SaaS products and APIs and other pieces that are out there and available, every one of which needs somebody that either works in marketing or product or engineering that deals with this thing. And then there's the Web3 component, and then there's the AR, VR, XR piece of it. So we've got like these branches shooting off, but I think that the more things change, the more they always stay the same. And that being able to definitively say, for $1, I can do this. For $2, I can do this, is going to be the key to successful developer relations, developer advocacy inside companies of all sizes for the next 2 to 3 years. Is a clear line of investment and ROI, reasonably based, right? If, for example, you hire a new CMO and you're a startup and you say, what are you going to do? They say, I need 6 months, right? As a rule, every person I've ever interviewed for the job says, I need 6 months. I need to learn the product. I need to learn the marketplace. I need to learn the customers. It's going to take 6 months to get my arms around the brand. 6 months, 6 months. And like the whole thing is going to explode in 6 months. We have to go faster than that. So what can we as an industry and as a discipline put in place as markers of best practice? I will do this thing to accomplish this thing with this in mind. That's where we are. We're in the building block stage of this, I believe. And there are brilliant, charming, highly engaging people who are brand ambassadors for their company, their community, and for themselves that I love. Jeremy's one of them. But the next piece of it is going to be, can you operationalize that community and your product at scale over and over and over again, like you were running your own business?
I don't know why that sounds like the impossible, but it is the logical next step.
I got your back. Don't worry about it.
I'm also going to admit I may have actually signed in as a learner, and I'm not going to lie, I love the pseudo vaporwave design pattern that you've got going on in the app itself.
Very cool, right?
Just throwing that out there. I'm a massive fan of synthwave and vaporwave design patterns.
So we have not done a good job marketing. It is incredibly hard to show people the experience on the homepage and in that space. We're working on it. My team's working on a redesign right now of the website. But you can't experience it until you experience it. Like, you have to log in and take a course. But once you're there, you're never not going to come back, because it is the best way to engage that stuff. We are relying on our partners to drive their developer network stuff right now. We call it BYOD, bring your own developer. So we launch with Meta, and they send us hundreds of thousands of their developer partners. And we say, while you're here, check in on your GDPR regulation, take a look at these App Store compliance pieces. What do you think about these guides? And there's various ways that we can support them, and that just scales and scales and scales.
Okay. I am curious. Because because like, you've done a lot of research, you've spoken to a lot of people, you've done a lot of stuff in the open, and like the questioning hasn't been a closed book approach. You've been just talking to people in open conversation, which I approve of. What about the platform itself? Is that ever going to be open? I don't mean open source. I mean open to discoverability. People being able to find and search stuff with just Google.
So the goal with the channels, the channels are relatively new, but the goal with the channels is the channels will be open so that they can be discoverable, and that the videos that will run at the top of those are called TLDRs, and they'll be shifted more frequently to drive SEO and to give people access. And then the next piece will be to sign in and use it. If you don't sign in, I can't get the attribution, and without attribution, the value piece doesn't work. The good news is, thus far, that small point of friction up front makes all the difference in the value proposition on the back end. Whereas if I were in the discovery evaluation sales funnel of normal SaaS products, when I got to the discovery piece and you asked me to do something for your benefit, I'm out. But if you ask me to do something for mine, now we're having a conversation.
Oh, relying on the selfish nature of human beings. To be fair, that's how capitalism works, so that makes sense.
It's worked out so far.
But yes, okay. So you've spoken about the challenges. You've said what you think the next step is. Now, you've obviously spoken to organizations of all different sizes. So you've obviously been dealing with Meta, Intel, Google, like what? 3 of the top 10 companies in all of North America and EMEA, at the very least. And you've obviously been talking to a lot of small organizations, people in the scale-up, small-sized people as well, like Skyflow, etc. Well, Skyflow is still technically a scale-up, I believe. I think so.
Should be.
And I'm pretty sure at some point you've had a conversation with my previous CDXO, Ivan Burazin, because mildly similar field, and he's a personality upon everything. I'm curious about where you think developer relations and the actual approaches are going to be most effective. So I currently work for a huge corporation, and we're effective because up until now, we've only been an enterprise. Well, up until the last 3 years, we've only been an enterprise organization. So DevRel is great because it's the first time we've talked to developers directly on its own.
That's right.
That's not always going to be the case. Like for Intel, there's going to be they have that. I used to do DevRel at IBM. There was a point where it no longer had the same level of effectiveness because the organization didn't need to talk to developers all the time.
That's right.
So,
or didn't think it needed to talk to developers.
Where do you feel the most effective space is going to be? Well, going forward.
Good question. I think it depends. I think it depends on your level of your commitment to innovation, right? Like the innovating with your products requires you to break stuff and to put out new things and teach people how to use them, and then change your things because they need to fit use cases you didn't even imagine when you were building the products. IBM is a great example, right? Like one of the world's leading innovation companies for decades, and then they just fell off a cliff. And then they got back on their feet to do some really interesting stuff. I think the stuff they're doing with the privacy cloud is really interesting. I think some of the computational components are interesting. Qualcomm's the same way, right? Like you do what now? You're the world's largest patent troll. Oh, no. You power AR, VR at scale. That's super cool. When did you start doing that again? And so you have that DNA never goes away. And if a company decides that it's going to be about innovation and it really wants to push the envelope, DevRel is going to be incredibly important because you have to go build loyalty. You have to do education. You have to get people to try things so that you can break and fix them. And then community management. And I don't mean like we're having a happy hour this afternoon. I mean, is anybody else seeing this problem? Like, are you running into this issue? Are you, and let them talk to each other? That's blocking and tackling DevRel, but it's incredibly important the more innovative your products get. The future of developer relations is scaled engagement. It has to be. People are working from their homes now. COVID broke our brains and our workforce. You can't do it the same way. Everybody is very online. So you can't do hackathons. You can't do meetup. I mean, you should. You can do all those things, but that's not scalable. And you need to be able to reach people in Nigeria the same way you would in San Diego. And so you have to offer asynchronous, on-demand, fully scalable support from a developer relations standpoint.
Oh God, the mentioning the breaking brain and the fact that everything is now terminally online is just a wonderful thing that reminds me of the amount of companies that are still trying to force people back into the office for community when most engineers just want to be at home building stuff and be left alone to it, which includes me half the time.
I've never met an engineer that wants to be in an office while building things, in an office while thinking about things, but not while building things.
Yeah. And it's okay. So data protocol designed as a platform for usage from everybody around the world, like be from sub-Saharan Africa, Far East Asia, etc. Here's an interesting question. How are you dealing with the different language problems of that stuff? This is something that, coming from a Croatian headquartered office and having to use Google Translate quite a lot for certain pieces. Not for the engineering side, every engineer writes in English, but just for certain things, I do have to use Google Translate quite regularly. How do you think that's going to play out now with the globalization of DevRel?
So for us, it's easy. It's just we can do a simple SDR switch, which changes the closed caption on the video, which is really easy. We can offer dubbing of the audio without much trouble at all. To a limit. We're not going to offer like 53 languages on top of a single file, but we're having a couple conversations right now about Mandarin being imported into existing content, which is not a big lift. I would tell you that if it's important to you that you're delivering content with a native language, it should also come from a native speaker, right? That in that instance will shoot 2 versions and it will geotag. And I'm totally fine with that. Like I think it's a good idea. I think that it's important that you meet people where they are. It's not just lip service. Empathy is the core of everything that we're trying to do here.
That makes absolute sense, considering the way information is shared in, say, North America and EMEA is very different from how it's shared in Japan, where their engineers are an awful lot more ISVRs. They're a lot more reseller based rather than direct integration engineers, which makes sense. Okay. Right. Oh, we have an interesting question here. You state that the platform was designed to teach developers the way they want to learn. I'm curious, what are the key markers of an exceptional learning experience? Ooh. That sounds like one definitely for one of your information architects.
Yeah, I mean, the first answer is outcome, right? It's proficiency. Did it work? The marker of whether or not you've done a good job is how competent and confident people feel with the information that they just consumed. When we set out to build this, one of the jokes was it's so good you can even teach privacy. But the idea of delivering information how people want it was really core, right? Giving that variability and the flexibility and all of those pieces. But ultimately, the proficiency is measured. Do I feel good? Am I smarter? Do I feel smarter? Am I ready to tackle this problem? And so those markers, we have my head of product. This is really interesting thing where he's like, look at all of this video that was watched for this one course. Here's how many people watched all of it. Here's how many people only watched to this point. Somebody could look at that and say, oh, look at that breakage. They left. They didn't like it. We look at it and say they got the answer to the question. They came to answer a question. When they answered it, they left. And we can tell because of sort of the flow of the thing. If there's a core breakage point, we look at it and say, well, that's not when it got boring. That's when we delivered the punchline. And so you got what you came for. We want you to leave. Get back to work, right? Like you came to find out 2.5 minutes in, you got the answer, go. So did we create a more engaging experience? Maybe, but did we deliver the information the way that it needed to be delivered? Absolutely.
Oh Lord, every SEO and business analyst is going to hate you for that, where they're all like, did they consume all the content? Did they reach the bottom? How long were they on the page for?
I don't care. Like I want to know whether or not they got the answer. The same thing about Coursera and Udacity, right? And look, I fell victim to this when we first started designing. One of the metrics I wanted to put in place is courses completed. That every course had an assessment. You had to answer 8 questions at the end. That's how we would validate that you did it. That would be the badge, blah, 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 blah. But that beta was rejected quickly by behavioral heuristics of people going through and being like, okay, I came to find out how many days I had during the review process around this submission. 92 seconds in, we answer that question, and there's a 14% drop off. Okay, I know why they were there, and now they can get back to work.
Okay. I'm going to ask a question now from a personal experience base again. So I've spent most of my DevRel career in open core businesses. So open source software that has been resold as a platform. For those who are unaware of what open core means. I'm now very curious because in those instances, community, which is what you essentially build by giving people a space to learn, is always designed to be self-sufficient. The community should always be able to support and help the community do things without having a dedicated support person having to always come in and answer the questions. They only have to answer the really awkward and difficult ones, or the ones very specific to the paid features that don't exist out in the community. How does that play around in Data Protocol, and how would you work with community supporting community? Because from what I've just gathered from pointing at the channels, it's a very personal approach to things. It is learning as an individual rather than as a collective.
I think that's right, though it scales, right? So the first thing I would do is say, if you're getting a repetitive question, if you have a person who's dedicated to answering a question and they're seeing a question over and over and over again, let's answer it once and be done with it. Right? Let's create a short code, 90 seconds, 4 minutes, fill it with resources, put it on the platform, use that link in a specific GIF, and that's how you answer the question. Put it in the Slack, put it in the Discord. Anytime somebody flags it, just cut and paste it and drop it in. And you'll get back hours of your life. You'll also deliver a better solution to those guys. I think number one, or maybe not number one, but certainly high on the list of value is that community will take those standards, take that information and run with it, right? They'll tell you whether or not it's useful. They'll tell you whether or not it's shareable. They'll add on to it. They'll tell you it should include this or it shouldn't include that. It should be open for them to improve on, just like the product itself. The other piece is that anybody entering into the community shouldn't feel like they're 2 years late to a Reddit channel, right? They should be primed to participate. So you could build even a full course. Do you know this? Do you know where this is? This is your expectation. Here's how this works. This is the cycle. If you have questions that the community can't answer, this is who you talk to. That lives inside Data Protocol for anybody you're bringing on board. And now you have attribution as that person participates in the larger community. And those two things talk to each other in a way that facilitates both your responsiveness, but also their comfort level that you're there to help. You don't have to hold their hand. They're going to be fine. This is a community for a reason. But give them a running start.
Okay. Well, I've run out of questions. I put a whole bunch of them together and I've asked them all, and now I am very, very curious. What's the future of Data Protocol now that it's spent the last 7 months in front of people? Now that you've done the beta testing and whatnot, and it's ready for the wild. What is the next thing you want to see happen to the platform?
A couple 100,000 users. I think that like the stuff that we're about to launch is massive, and the communities are enormous. I'm not worried about the pickup. I'm worried. I'm concerned. I'm prioritizing how often they come back, how satisfied they. So we asked them: is this a better way to learn? Is this? Do you wish your partners would do more of this? If we offered this, would you be interested? And we put those discussion points and what we call sentiment questions throughout the courses, but also throughout the pages. They're not required, they're fully volunteer, but what we end up with is a pretty good snapshot of satisfaction. As I mentioned, 93% of developers say this is a better way. Our numbers around do you feel confident and competent now that you have are just as high. We have a lot of faith that the developers will tell us we're wrong if we're wrong. And so we are eager to ask tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people every day, what do you think? Can we do better? Should we do more of this, less of that? And then to work with companies, right? Are you ready? Do you want to build some of this? You want to kick the tires on what this looks like? There's no reason. The price is not too high on this. It is perfectly reasonable. This is not a misallocation or even a reallocation of resources. And it's an extension of a commitment you've already made. You have to invest in this community or it will leave you. Right. There was an article yesterday that I posted about on LinkedIn where Apple's having a hard time getting people to build for their Vision Pro. It's because they've been pissing all over developers for 20 years. It's because they didn't pay any attention. They didn't care that developers were mad at them about any number of things that they did wrong. If Apple's not immune to this thing, Ngrok's not.
Yeah, an organization so huge and so powerful, for lack of a better word to describe Apple, they haven't made life for small organizations easy.
No. And I think that Spotify, Epic, and Netflix would tell you they haven't made it easy for big organizations either.
Then again, Spotify hasn't made it easy for engineers either.
No, they're having a rough go.
Yes, having seen the evolution of the amazing developer experience and then death of it and then rise of it again like a phoenix and death of it at least 3 times with Spotify, yes.
Spotify is a perfect example of what we're talking about though, right? They want to be a data company. Data companies depend on developers. In order to create scale, you have to create a developer relations, developer dashboard, developer ecosystem that supports it. Not every idea is going to be a winner. Not every developer is created equal. Not every business is built for success. But you have to be willing to water that garden in order to grow things. And their time horizon is always too fast, and they don't know how to measure success. That success has to start with an assumption of, I'm going to expend resources with an idea of success, and then you build and iterate on what those triggers are, what those milestones are, the mile marker of each point, and then continue to reinvest. The problem is they get to the second mile marker and they're lagging behind. They close up shop and walk away for a year and a half. Now you got to start all over again. It was more expensive to do it again than it was to just keep going.
Yes. The curse of most things around the developer relations and developer education space. The moment it looks like it's failing, you kill it, and then it takes twice as much money and effort to get it back again.
You can't microwave this stuff, right? Like this is it takes what it takes.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for a ridiculously interesting conversation. I'm very grateful to have had the chance to talk to you. I have some outro notes here. Would you like to read them through because they're mostly about you, or would you like me to do it for you?
Fire away.
Okay, so I've already dropped a link into the chat. So if you want to go and play with it for yourself, there is free accounts as a learner. It's dataprotocol.com. I'll also include in the show notes if people who are too lazy to type it out. And there is currently 7 partners I saw in their channels.
There's a couple, I think there's 110 or so videos, pieces of content on platform. We are working with companies like BP, Virgin Media, VMware, but the courses and content, Skyflow, Slack, Meta, MetaQuest, Google, some of the Firebase stuff, checks. There's some really good stuff on there, as well as a bunch of platform and product agnostic content that we continue to build and keep updated.
Nice. I may actually have to go poke that. And then there is the fact that you're a very dangerous person here as a CEO who's making themselves available to developers and DevRel people as well. You can, if you wish to, talk to Jake via the medium of, I'm assuming it has your email here. I won't post that in the chat, but I will put it in the show notes just in case if you're okay with that.
Absolutely. Jake at protocol.com. Fire away.
Okay, that avoids me trying to be polite and not doxing it.
It's totally fine.
As well as you are okay with everybody poking you in the real world as well.
I am. I absolutely am. And I'm at Jacob M. Ward on Twitter. Look, we're going to find out what our end user thinks about our product, and I want to hear directly from folks. If you're okay with me stealing your ideas, I'm okay with having a conversation.
I can happily state, as somebody who's been doing this for a while, I'm okay with you stealing the ideas because it's less stress of me having to work out how to do it my damn self.
Yeah, I hear that.
And there is 2 events you already have confirmed. You are going to be at that conference, which I am so ridiculously jealous of. You're going to be around Kelly Vaughan and Chuck and Rob from the Web and Whiskey podcast, which I listen to religiously. I'm kind of jealous. I kind of want to shake hands.
Yeah, it's gonna be a good conference. I'm excited.
And you're also going to be at Developer Week in San Francisco next month.
Yeah, the 21st, 22nd, 23rd of February, I believe.
Are these as sponsors or just people around to talk to?
Just people around to talk to. I'm probably going to do a dinner at Developer Week, and then I'm actually going to do the DMA event in Miami on March 26th, and I'm definitely hosting a dinner then. So if people are around and they want to chat, give me a shout, and we'll figure it out.
You heard it here, people. If you want to be able to have a chat, Jake's going to be there for you to go and catch him. And, hang on. Is this correct? You are looking at Infobip Shift in Miami in April.
I'm looking at it, I suppose.
Okay. I may have to find ways to twist your rubber arm with that one, just because it would be nice to actually have a conversation with you rather than me going, oh my crap, we've won something.
I will see you there then. It's an easy flight. I'm happy to come.
I have. We've been looking at our next series of Infobip Connect meetups up the East Coast, and I was like, well, we don't want to do everywhere, but it's like, New York is way too overcrowded. Raleigh, Charlotte, Charleston.
And host it right here.
And
right here in the office.
St. Louis, and said, maybe we should share that. We now know that there are organizations building cool stuff in Charleston now. But yes, that's where you will find Jake and anyone else from the team, or is it just going to be you?
I think a couple more folks are going to come with me to Miami when we go down. By myself at that conference and probably in San Francisco, though that's TBD.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And I will see everybody at a later episode, or more likely just building random crap on the internet as usual. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Mike.